Thanks, last Count Corley. And can I thank Deputy Coppinger for bringing this bill forward. I have to say, when I was curious to see what the government's amendment to a bill which is about equal participation in schools. And you couldn't think really of something that would appear to be just more obvious or less controversial than a bill that is about equal participation in schools. And yet, the government have put forward an amendment where they have signalled their intent to block the further passage of this bill. So that's about as clear as it gets. This government does not believe in equal participation in school. Which makes me think, in all seriousness, Fine Gael should change their slogan to being the best small country in the world to discriminate against children. Because that is the thrust of their motion. Or maybe the best small country in the world to brainwash children and shove a particular religious ethos down their throats, regardless of whether they share that religious view or indeed have no religious belief whatsoever. But that is in fact what the government are proposing to do, to retain a status quo where it is all right in law to discriminate against particular groups of children. And that is really, frankly, shameful. I mean, the sort of Irishness of it is brilliantly summed up in the famous Article 7.3c of the Equal Status Act. And let me just quote it for people who haven't read it. The Equal Status Act 7.3c says, an educational establishment does not discriminate where the establishment is a school providing or a post-primary education to students, and the objective of the school is to provide education in an environment which promotes certain religious values. It admits persons of a particular religious domination in preference to others, or it refuses to admit as a student a person who is not of that denomination. Let me cut that short. An educational establishment does not discriminate where it admits persons of a particular religious denomination in preference to others, or refuses to admit it as a student, a person who is not of that denomination. So, you don't discriminate if you do discriminate. That's what our law says. It's unbelievable. I mean, you couldn't make it up. And this was a Fianna Fáil bill. So we have the religious Taliban are not some distant exotic threat. The religious Taliban exist in this country. The law continues to give them the right to dominate our schools, and the religious Taliban are represented faithfully right into the 21st century by Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. It really is unbelievable. What that means for young people who are of minority faiths or who have no faith at all is that they are isolated, they are excluded, they are made feel different. What a shameful thing to do to young people. It truly is. And it's unconscionable how the government can stand over a situation where that is allowed to continue. When I heard the young school student Megan, who spoke at our press conference the other day, talking about how this impacts on the quality of education that school students are still getting, it really just, shocked me. And it made me think about James Joyce and the Portrait of an Artist. And I would really recommend that the members of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who clearly have never read it, should read it, chapter 3 in particular, where the Jesuit priest, in a retreat, lectures the young school children on the hell and damnation that they will suffer because if they give any kind of expression to sexual appetite, or if they refuse to submit to the authority of God, if they refuse to accept that the divine power is a power to which they have to submit. And Joyce brilliantly characterises the feelings of guilt that he felt as a young child, of fear, of terror, that he would suffer retribution if he had sexual feelings, or if he refused to submit to the, if you like, the diktat of the religious authorities. And of course, this kind of stuff has very serious implications. The modern version of this, which incredibly is still going on, as Deputy Coppinger alluded to, when in a situation where more than 80% of the schools are dominated by a particular religious ethos, refusing to give proper sex education, which is a matter of the health and safety of our young children, because it doesn't suit their religious ethos. Or refusing even really to acknowledge the existence of LGBT people, refusing to give proper education about sexually transmitted diseases and how you can protect yourself, making young people feel guilty about sexual feelings, and so on. It's absolutely shameful. Shameful. That we allow that to pertain, but that's what the government are proposing to do. Deputy Coppinger's bill proposes to remove that imperative in the law put in by Micheál Martin. Again, not a legacy issue, not some sort of residue from a dark, distant past, but Micheál Martin's decision in 1988 to allow the particular, the characteristic spirit of the school to pervade the school day. And that means, in the vast, vast majority of schools, the Catholic ethos or the Christian ethos with all that goes with it. Instead of encouraging young people to think for themselves, to properly educate them about sexuality, about reproductive health, and so on, no, the school are allowed to deny them those things or shove a particular doctrine down their throat. It is absolutely scandalous that the government would allow that to continue. And I'll just conclude, last Count Corla, by saying how angry I am that this is then justified in the government's amendment, incredibly, by reference to the need to protect minority religions and faiths. Let me make this absolutely clear, Minister. I would fight to the death for the right of somebody to profess and hold their own religious belief and have the right to practice it. But the reality is that by allowing the current situation to pertain, anybody who has a minority faith is being discriminated against, or somebody who has no faith at all is being discriminated against. You're not upholding some sort of diversity of religious views or no views. You are actively allowing discrimination against minorities and against those with no religious faith at all. And what this bill is proposing is that school facilities should be allowed, be made available to those with particular religious beliefs or particular religious denominations after school hours. After school hours. So that when we're talking about an education system that is entirely funded by the public, in school buildings that are funded for and built by the public and maintained by the public, that a particular religious denomination should not be allowed to take advantage and exploit those public facilities in order to shove a particular religious doctrine down the throats of children and deny rights and exclude and isolate those who don't share those beliefs or who have different beliefs. So I would appeal to the government, withdraw your quite quite disgraceful amendment and allow this simple bill, which is about equality, pass to the next stage and actually bring in the equality that the majority of people in this country expect for our children.